If you saw in the email I sent out last night, I was reminded of growing up in the 50s, and we had 3 channels, broadcast channels on the TV, maybe 4. And one of them, every Saturday, it was just one right after the other, black and white movies, old grainy black and white movies, Charlie Chan movies, cowboy movies, all kinds of movies. And as kids, we used to just kind of get together at somebody's house and just sit there in front of that TV set and watch movies all Saturday afternoon. And one of our favorites was the Sherlock Holmes series, and I think it was a series that was shot in the 40s, maybe the 30s, but clearly the 40s. And it was English actor Basil Rathbone played the part of Sherlock Holmes. And he had the deer slayer cap, and he had the pipe with the big curved stem, and he had the caped coat, and he would go around solving the mysteries, And one of the things that was kind of fun about it was he enjoyed the mystery. He enjoyed the discovery. Something would happen, and Watson would tell him what was going on, and he'd realize that they had a great mystery to solve, and he would say, "The game's afoot, the game's afoot," and they would begin this adventure together, but with a sense of enthusiasm, with a sense of excitement that this was going to be something worth doing. They were going to have fun doing this together. And of course, if you saw one, you saw them all. That by the end, you knew that Sherlock Holmes was going to have solved whatever this seemingly unsolvable case was that you were given at the beginning. But along the way, he would gather clues. And some of the clues would be red herrings, that the writers would cleverly put in something there to distract you. And you'd be trying to follow the clues, and all of a sudden you'd be going off on this tangent, and maybe you'd realize that wasn't where you needed to go and bring yourself back, or maybe you'd be completely fooled by the plot twist, and you would just assume it was the wrong person, But there was something fun about being engaged in watching the movie, being engaged in solving that mystery. I think when we get to the end, everybody wants to say, "Yeah, I knew that. I knew that all along. That's who I thought did it. That's the one." So there's some kind of an intrigue, I guess. There's some kind of a curiosity within us that serves as a motive force that kind of keeps us interested. Excuse me, keeps us engaged. And this mystery genre, I'm sure it's been around as long as storytellers have been around, because it does that. It holds the viewer's attention. It kind of brings you into the story. Maybe you become Sherlock Holmes and you become Dr. Watson, or maybe you become a sleuth who's trying to out-sleuth them. But you're there, you're involved, you're engaged. And I guess when our kids were growing up, the Hardy Boys, Nancy Drew mysteries were very popular on TV, and of course they were popular in book form back in the 30s. But on TV, they became popular maybe in the 70s or the 80s, I guess. And the kids used to love watching those. But one fond memory that came back to me when I was thinking of all this is when our children were just infants. We were enrolled in a Book of the Month club, and I think it was Disney. And these little storybooks for infants. So it was a little square book, maybe 4 inches by 6 inches. And of course they had pictures, and at the bottom of the page was just maybe one simple sentence, And the idea was that you would sit there with the child, and you would open the book, and they would sit up on your lap, and you would open the book and point to the pictures, and you would read the story to them. And they loved that, From the time that they could pay attention, we were reading these stories to them, And as they grew, when they got old enough to sit up and take their little finger, if you made the name of the character, you said the name of the character, they would reach out on the page, and they would touch, that's Donald Duck there, And they would come to get engaged. They would come to be in that story. And long before they knew their letters, and long before they could read words, they knew every word in that book. They knew every picture, and they knew every word that went with every picture in that book. And if you got a word wrong, if you were reading it and you got a word wrong, well, they would correct you. No, that's not right, Daddy. That's not right. And they would tell you the right word, So then the game became making mistakes, reading the story, but deliberately calling out the wrong name of a character or changing words around and just pausing just ever so slightly, just pausing, waiting for them to correct us. And this is how they learned, and this is how they grew. By the time the littlest guy was out of that phase, I don't know, we must have had 100 or so of these books in the house, and they're just precious memories. But it was the same idea that was working in the mystery novel. The same idea. See, they were engaged, and they not only were learning the story, but they wanted to correct us. And one of the favorite stories that we used to read them, and I can't tell you how many times Lori and I have read this story. It must be thousands between the two of us. And it was called The Mystery of the Missing Peanuts. And the plot was very simple. Somebody had a sack of peanuts in their pantry, and the peanuts were disappearing. And Detective Donald Duck would come, and of course he had the deer slayer cap and the big microscope. He was called to come and solve the mystery of the missing peanuts, And on each page, he would get a different clue. He would go someplace else. And at the end, we'd find out that it was Chip and Dale, it was two other little colorful characters, and they were carrying the peanuts back to their house, and they were eating the peanuts. And over and over and over again. I think that was their favorite story. What story do you want to know? Oh, the mystery of the missing peanuts. The mystery of the missing peanuts. And I just want you to kind of have that feeling of delight, that feeling of wonder, that these little ones have as they're learning, as they're growing, as they're discovering, And the feeling of joy that we too have when our curiosity, when we follow our curiosity, when we let it to take us beyond the clues, to take us to someplace we know must be there. You see, something happened. This mystery didn't occur by itself. I love in Sherlock Holmes, his arch enemy was Moriarty, and I don't know. I think there was maybe one episode you actually got to see that there was a Moriarty, but the whole time people were saying, does Moriarty even exist? And Sherlock Holmes' answer was, it must. Do you think these things just happen by themselves? Do you think the brakes on the bus fail and it has an accident by itself? No, it was Moriarty. So there's something there. You see, there was someone there. There was something there to pursue. There was something there to discover. There was something there that was worth going after. But it was a game. See, it was fun. It wasn't a drudgery. It wasn't like, oh my goodness, I got to go do this again. It was a joy. It was a joy in the way that he went about and outsmarted the villains and gathered the clues that mere mortals would have missed. But they were there, and he was attuned to them, and he discovered them. So I'd like you to take kind of that image, the combined image, the joyfulness of a child in discovery, learning and growing and expanding its horizons. Every time you'd read them the story, from the time that they could barely sit up until they were old enough to read the words, every time you go through with them, there was something different, there was something new, there was something wonderful and worth having. To the young adults, to the Nancy Drews and the Hardy Boys running around and solving the mysteries all the way through to Sherlock Holmes and Watson as they go about solving the mysteries. So what does this have to do with our spiritual growth is you and I, we are engaged in one of the most wonderful mysteries, one of the most wonderful discoveries of all time. Of all times. We are in the process of discovering just what it means to be a spiritual being, just what it means that the very love of God is expressing its life in us, as us, and through us. What is this thing that we call the soul? What is this thing that we call the Christ within, where the divine becomes human? how magnificent is it? See, how wonderful is it? And sometimes it helps if we think of it to be an exciting adventure. You know, Dr. Holmes said that we are explorers. We are adventurers and explorers in the unexplored territory of mind, with a capital M, meaning God. Adventurers and explorers. You know, and think about all of the things that we as human beings and the human race and culture over time, all of the things that we have put our time and attention to, all of the things that we have discovered. You know, I marvel when I look at the pictures from the Hubble telescope. I'm amazed when I look at the videos of the rockets, still watching rockets go up from Cape Canaveral. Remember when I was a kid growing up, you know, the first time we heard Sputnik, you know, floating overhead, just beeping at us. It was kind of an awe. It was just kind of magnificent and scary all at the same time, you know. We have discovered everything that we have set our mind to discover about the physical universe so far, you know. We have either discovered or we have plans in place and experiments in place to try and discover. You know. I was reading something where they have experiments at the bottom of the deepest mine shafts. They have big vats of water there with sensors on them, and they're looking for some type of a particle that just passes through us without us even noticing it. And they think down in this undisturbed environment that somehow it will disturb the water enough that they will detect it, you know. People thinking, well, what is there, and how can I find out what is there? What kind of an experiment can I run? What kind of information can I gather? And their curiosity just keeps driving them forward, moving them on, getting them engaged. So the other night I was driving home, and I just caught a brief segment on the radio, and it was about hate groups. And they were interviewing a man who 30 years ago, he was a skinhead in the United States. He was part of a hate group. And he was engaged in that organization for a number of years. And then he kind of had an awakening. And I thought it was interesting. They asked him, what was it that got you thinking in a different way? What was it that got you out of this hate movement? And his answer was, people of color were more compassionate to me than I deserved. And I started to realize that everything I believed wasn't true. See, love, compassion is what melted his heart. So now he goes about and he helps people who are in those types of organizations. He helps them to get out, because people who are in those types of organizations will more readily listen to somebody who has been there and left than they will listen to someone who has never been part of that. So the interviewer asked him, they said, what was it that got you into it in the first place? What was the attraction that this organization had for you, or this ideology had for you? And he had his answer ready. He has written a book about this, so naturally he would have his answer ready to the question. And he said, I was at a time in my life, he says, where I had grown up. He says, I was 13 or 14 years old. And I grew up and I had been bullied my whole life. He says, and I was searching for identity, community, and a sense of purpose. He says, and somebody from one of these skinhead organizations saw me one day and came over and started talking to me. And what they said helped me to identify with the group, become a member of that community, and then I had a sense of purpose, which was to go out and conduct the works of this group. And he kept emphasizing that throughout the interview. Many times he would use those three words: identity, community, and sense of purpose. And when he said that, a little alarm bell went off in the back of my head. And I'm thinking to myself, identity, community, and a sense of purpose, isn't that what everybody is looking for? Isn't that what we are all searching for? Isn't there like this little something within us that causes us to seek, that causes us to look for it? There's either Augustine or Thomas Aquinas who said we wouldn't have the desire to pray if God had not first put it in our hearts. There is that which causes us to seek. That which we are seeking is seeking us. That which we are seeking has caused us to seek. We wouldn't have the desire to want to know God, to want to experience God, to want to know more about who and what we are, our own identity, our own community, our own sense of purpose. We wouldn't have that if it wasn't something already within us that is moving us forward. And I was reminded of another piece that I heard, and it was on the 25th anniversary of the Jonestown disaster, or Jonestown massacre, whatever you want to call it, down in Ghana, with Jim Jones and the People's Temple. And for the 25th anniversary, they brought back a reporter who more than 25 years ago had been covering the People's Temple in Los Angeles before they went down to Ghana. Before all that, there was an organization in, I believe it was Los Angeles, in California for sure. And the interviewer asked this man, who had also written a book about the 25th anniversary of Jonestown. He asked them, well, tell me about this organization. Tell me about when you first became aware of this organization. You first got assigned to the beat to go cover this organization. What is it that you think attracted people to the organization? And I was really taken back by the guy's answer. You know, I thought it was going to be very matter-of-factual. Well, this, and this. He got very animated. He got very excited. Of course, it's hard to see that through the radio, but you could hear it in his voice. He said, it was a fantastic organization. He said, it was my job to cover them. He says, but if it wasn't my job to cover them, he says, I would have personally liked to belong to that organization. And I think the interviewer was taken back by the response as well. And he says, well, what is it? What was it about that organization? What was it that was so attractive? And the guy said, wow. He says, first of all, he says, they were doing something that no other organization was doing. They were doing something that the other churches weren't doing. They had a very diverse group of people. They were active in the community. They were out being love in the community, and they really felt good about what they were doing. Right? He says they belonged to something special. There was a feeling that they belonged to something special, that they were doing good works, and he said they had great music. He said those three things. He says those three things, he said, really attracted me to it. And I'm thinking identity, community, and a sense of purpose. Identity, community. I am a member of this organization. I am a member of this community. My identity is with that community, and this community is doing good works, and I am doing good works. I have a sense of purpose. Now it all went askew. It all went crazy after that. But that stuck with me. You know, these people were part of something special. They were part of something that they felt good about, and they had a sense of purpose. So I think these two things coming together, these two stories, and as I open with our sense of curiosity and our sense of wanting to discover the mystery, I think that it's telling us that there is that within us which is causing us to seek. There is that within us which is naturally curious. We want to know, to put it in philosophical terms, who am I? Why am I here? And where am I going? What is my identity? What is my community? What is my sense of purpose? And it can be great fun. It can be great joy for us to do this. So like in the mystery movies and the mystery novels, the plot is always kind of the same, or at least the story arc is kind of the same. Right? It starts out, something happened. Nobody knows what happened. We've got to figure out how this happened. Why did this happen? Who done it? All those kind of things. And then the detective gets into the case, thrown into the case, and goes around to different locations, meeting different characters usually, and gathering clues along the way until eventually the mystery is solved. And along the way there are so many distractions, right? Along the way there are all of these things that would lead an ordinary person astray. But somehow our hero, somehow Sherlock Holmes is able to see through the distractions. Right? Remember Columbo? Peter Fox Columbo, Everybody thought he was a bumbling fool, but he was keen. He was always alert. He was always paying attention. Even when everybody thought he was just distracted, he was still on task. So our life is something like that. Our life is like that. The Buddhists have a saying that we don't know how the game started. We don't know how the game of life started. But we're here, and it's on. The game is on, The game is afoot, as Sherlock Holmes would say. And the thing for us to do is to learn how it works and to work with it. It's a mystery to be discovered. It is an adventure for you and I to go on. What is this thing called life? Who am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? All of these different things that come up. And I would like today, if we could do this today, is to have this sense of delight, this sense of wonder, this sense of awe of a small child sitting on his parents' lap, pointing out the pictures in the book, That's us. See, that is us learning about life. That is us learning about love. That is us learning who we are, why we are here, where we are going. And this life, just like the novels and the movies, this life is full of distractions. There are so many things that we can give our time and attention to. In fact, there are more things that we can give our time and attention to than we have time and attention. There just are. And today, with access to the internet, and we can look up anything, we can start to read anything, we can listen to anything, just about any song you want to listen to, you can find and listen to it. There are just so many things that we can point our attention to. And where I was going before is that in our society, in our culture, in our Western culture, for all of these thousands of years of recorded history, we have been looking externally. We have been looking out there. We have been weighing and measuring and touching the physical world. And all of our orientation is on external things. And yet the amount of time that we have spent looking within and learning about our own selves seems to be limited. I picked up a book about a month or so ago, and it was by a Western philosopher of consciousness. I didn't even know such a thing existed. But he was a Western philosopher of consciousness. And he was talking about the latest theories about what Western scientists think about what is mind, what is consciousness. Now we use those words all the time, but do we even know what we're talking about? And I would say no, we don't. We have opinions, we have ideas, but what is an idea? Do you even know what an idea is? We each say that we have ideas. We each say, I just had an idea. Did we really have an idea? Or did the idea occur someplace else and we became aware of it? This is where this philosopher was going. And he said it's like there's a little field of awareness and things pop into it. We say, oh, I had an idea. But the process by which it popped in, we are totally unaware of. We don't know how that happens. And I'm reading what he's writing, and I'm glad that somebody is looking into this. I think it's wonderful that we're starting to turn the focus within, But other people in other cultures have been doing this for thousands of years. And he didn't acknowledge them once. He didn't once go and say, well, this is what the Tibetan Buddhists have taught about consciousness. It was like a totally new discovery, totally new concept. Was it Gallagher used to do that? Totally new concept. Totally new concept. So this mystery that we are being called to solve, we're spending a lot of time. See, our curiosity, think of it this way, our curiosity moves us forward. But what direction forward is to us, that's up to us. So we're born to seek, but what we seek is up to us. We can follow whatever clues we want to follow. We can go down whatever alley we want to go down. We can follow whatever red herring we want to follow. We can look out there in the world out there all we want. But that doesn't satisfy our seeking. That doesn't satisfy our curiosity. It entertains us. It keeps us busy. It keeps us distracted. But it doesn't satisfy us. The longing is still there. The desire to know, the desire to experience. Who am I? Why am I here? Where am I going? What is this thing called life? In New Testament terminology, I think Paul said something to the effect of, who am I that God is even mindful of me? Who am I that God is even mindful of me? What is my identity? Where is my community? What is my purpose? And as long as we are looking into the external world, as long as we are looking out there into things, as long as we're trying to define ourselves in terms of what we can weigh, what we can measure, and what we can touch, which is what Western science does. There's even a debate amongst Western scientists as to whether a thought experiment was a real experiment because you couldn't weigh, measure, or touch a thought. So part of our culture is very, very heavily loaded or biased in the externals. And really what we want to be looking at is the internal. Not what am I looking at, but what am I looking with? Not I am looking at it, but who is looking at it? Is this thing called life separate? Or is this thing called life one, unity, oneness, wholeness? So now we start to think about my identity. Who am I? Where did I come from? Where am I going? What is this thing called life? And as we look out there, we look with our intellect, we separate things. We put them into into separate categories. We give them a name. We give them a label. We memorize the name or the label, and we think we know everything there is about them because we can identify the name or the label. And in fact, we know nothing about them other than the name or the label. But as we start to go back, I think of it as kind of going back through a tunnel. It's interesting. People who have near-death experiments talk about going through the tunnel. But I think of religious or spiritual inquiry as kind of going back. So we have all of these many different forms of life. But what is this thing called life that is back of them? How is it that different forms of life have ways of supporting each other and communicating with each other, whether it be through smell or like I'm thinking of the bees and the pollen and things like this. But they work together for the mutual good. They work together for the mutual good. Even the animals that use each other as food are working together for the mutual good. They reintroduced wolves into Yellowstone Park after years of them being gone, and they found out that the entire ecosystem of the park got stronger. That the sick and the old animals were culled from the herds, so the herds got stronger. They found that that the animals that had been foraging, that would go right up to the banks of a creek and trample the plants there, that they no longer would do that, because they would give some room, some safety, so that the wolves wouldn't pop out of the brush and get them. But the rivers, even the rivers and the creeks and the waterways, all started to change by reintroducing this predator. Now, in our way of looking at things, we would say, "Oh, isn't that terrible? That animal kills and eats other animals." But it has a place. It has a place. Everything works together. Now you can say, well, that happened over time. It evolved over time. That's the way it became, and that would probably be true. But what is this force behind things that expresses itself in the different forms of animals, in the different forms of creatures that all work together? And we would start to intellectually, we would start to be walking the razor's edge, right? We're using the intellect to tell us that there's a place where the intellect does not exist and the intellect cannot go. You cannot take the intellect there with you. There is something in back of, there is something behind, or something that came first. And it is this thing called life, and it is one. It is one. And then we look at what the theologians tell us, and they tell us that God is one. That God is one. But in our process of discovering that, we have come to believe in separation. We have come to believe in otherness. This is the biblical representation of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You notice it didn't say that good and evil were real. It didn't say they were entities. It said there was knowledge of good and evil. The belief in duality, the belief in separation, the belief in otherness. And there's another tree in the garden that we're trying to get back to, which is the tree of life. And all of life is one. All of life is one. So the mystery that you and I, or part of the mystery that you and I are working on and trying to solve is that every day as we go through our day, every day, we are doing two things. Number one is we are trying to experience the oneness. We are trying to experience the sameness. We are trying to experience the unity with all of life. And a beautiful way to do that is with gratitude, with appreciation. Just looking at everything and stopping for a moment to acknowledge how wonderful it is. I'm looking out the window here today, and buds are coming back on the trees. The fruit trees have flowers on them now. The ground is white in places. It looks like it's been snowing. And just a few weeks ago, these trees were bare. In another couple of weeks, the leaves will be so full I won't be able to see the sky behind them. And I don't know how many millions of years there's been trees on this plot of ground doing that. And they take our breath and they process it and they give it back to us. And we take their breath and we process it and we give it back to them. And we go through this. We go through this thing called life. And every minute of every day, there is something miraculous occurring if we would but take time to notice it. So the first thing we want to do is be mindful. Be mindful. What's going on about us? How is it all connected? How am I part of all of this? What are the thoughts that are appearing in my field of consciousness? Perhaps not even my field of consciousness, but in the field of consciousness. Do I need to act upon them? Or are they too a red herring, a distraction? See, as we start to grow, as we start to turn our attention within, as we start to do our spiritual practice, we become less and less impulsive in, oh, I had a thought, I need to do something about that. Oh, I had an emotion, I need to do something about that. So instead of saying something is good or something is bad, something is. It just is. You see, it just is. Because the minute we define something as good, we mean something else has to be bad. Good is a relative term. Is. It just is. God just is. So we start to search for our identity, and we find out that there is no our identity. No our identity apart from the one. That our identity is of the one. The wave does not exist without the ocean. The wave is the ocean waving. The wave is the ocean expressing itself uniquely. But you can't take the wave. All the tools that we now have wouldn't work. Religion, as Dr. Holmes tells us, we look hand in hand today when religion and science, we look forward to the day when religion and science shall walk hand in hand from the visible to the invisible. Walk back with me. Walk back past the externals. Walk back past the things that separate. And remember the words of that young man who said that it was love. It was compassion. It was love. What is love but the experience of oneness? It was love that brought him out of hate. It was love that let him start to experience something differently. So what we want to do, Kate Wolf had it right, we want to give ourselves to love. We want to examine whatever we think our identity is now. And as the East would tell us, neti neti. Not this, not that. No. The Tao that can be named is not the real Tao. We work back, we work back, we work back. Until we just get to the isness, the suchness, the I amness. God is all there is. And God is love. And love is all there is. Anything that tells us differently is confused. So once we start to get a grip on this thing that we call identity, who am I? And eventually we get to I am not, but God is. I am not, but God is. Remember the story of the Sufi who died and went to heaven and knocked on the door, and God came to the other side and said, who is it? And the guy said his name. God said, sorry, heaven's full. No room for you. Come back another time. And this went on a couple times, and finally the Sufi knocked on the door. And God said, who is it? And the fellow said, it's you. And God opened the door and said, come in. There's no room for both of us in here. There's just one. There's just one. Our mind can't grasp that. Our intellect can't understand that. But we can experience that when we experience love. So be mindful during the day. Be mindful of our unity. Tune into love. Find the love. Experience the love. Be love. be loved? How can you be loved today? How can you go out that door after this service is over? How can you go out that door and express unity and love in some way? And I don't know what that way might be for you. But there's probably something in your heart that's pointing you in that direction. Go do this. Go here. Go there. Follow the joy. Follow the joy. Because the discovery of God within is joyful. It's not a struggle. It's not something to be afraid of. It is bliss. It is pure bliss. It is that which we are seeking. As Rumi says, like the moth that will fly into the flame for the bliss of the moment of uniting. That is our destiny. So then we can look at our community and we can say that our community is the oneness. Our community is the allness. Our community is life. We separate ourselves from no one, from nothing. Even those who would do what we would call evil. We don't condone what they did. But we recognize that they too are part of the wholeness and part of the oneness, and they too can awaken to that and will awaken to that when the time is right. So we don't waste our energy separating and dividing and condemning and complaining. And that's the other thing to look for is, what are the red herrings in your life? What is it that's sucking you in and getting you engaged and taking you away from your primary purpose, which is to discover the presence of God within, to experience the presence of God within, to realize the presence of God within. That's your purpose. That's my purpose. That's everyone's purpose. But what are the red herrings? What are the red herrings that we love to follow? Ooh, maybe I'll just go look over here for a little while. Maybe I'll just go look over there for a little while. Again, I'll come back to Rumi, who's so insightful. And of course, he was writing around the year 1300, late 1200s, early 1300s. He was writing. So you have to kind of get this picture, because he's talking about street lamps and policemen, even in the year 1300. And he's talking about the policeman is walking down the street, and underneath the street light, he sees a drunk on his hands and knees. And the policeman says to the drunk, he says, "What are you doing?" And the man says, "Well, I dropped my keys, and I'm looking for them so I can get into my house and go to bed." And the policeman says, "Well, I'll help you look." He says, "Where did you drop them?" And the guy says, "Well, I was over there by the front door, and I dropped them, and I can't find them." And the policeman said, "If you dropped your keys over there by the front door, why are you out here in the road on your hands and knees?" And the guy says, "Well, the light's better here." Didn't make any sense. But he allowed himself to be distracted from that which he said he wanted, which was to find his keys. And I think we get the meaning. We get the meaning. We all say we want to find the love of God. We all say that we want to find our soul. We want to find the bliss, the unlimited beauty, the unconditional love. We want to find that, and the only place we'll find it is within ourselves. But we insist on going someplace where it seems easier to look, someplace out there. And at some point we have to recognize those distractions, and we have to say, wait a second, the game is afoot. The game is afoot. I have come here to this place at this time because it is the perfect place for my soul to be, to grow and to develop. It is the perfect place for me to discover more of what God as me is and can be. It is the perfect place for me to discover the unity of all life. And I'll waste no more time. I'll be serious and joyful, both at the same time. I will stay on point. I will stay on task. I will not be fooled. I will not be deceived. I will figure out the things that I came here to figure out. And I will grow. And I will grow. Life is constantly expanding. Constantly expanding. We look at the universe, it's constantly expanding, you know. Everything is expanding. Everything is growing. This time of the year is wonderful because in the springtime, life is coming back to things that appeared to be dead, you know. You go out in the driveway, you have any little cracks that the ants been bringing up dirt, something's growing in there. And if you don't take care of it, it'll get down there and it'll crack more concrete and more concrete and more concrete. And over time, the concrete will be gone. And the vegetation will have taken back over. Life is constantly growing. Life is constantly expanding. And we are part of that, and we must be growing and expanding with it. So I invite you to find the joy in your heart. Find whatever it is that brings you joy, because that is probably the clearest clue that you have. It is trying to lead you to fulfillment. Find what helps you to experience oneness. Find what helps you to experience gratitude. Find what helps you to experience love. See, those are the things that will endure. Those are the things that will last. Those are the things that will grow and expand. And leave the rest behind. Leave the rest behind. In 100 years, no one's going to care how much money you made, what titles you had at the office, the wonderful businesses you started or not-for-profits that you started. It's all going to be forgotten. But you will still be discovering, still be experiencing, and still be expressing the love and the presence of God that is you. And get to know it now. And so it is.